Hey guys, it's been a while and I'm sorry this is coming to you late, but I really wanted to do a March reading wrap up because I read a lot of great books, and I finally got into audiobooks for the first time ever, and so I really wanted to like recap it. I'm going to be using my phone as audio because I really wanted to film outside because it's such a beautiful morning. So I really hope you guys can hear me okay. And yeah, let's get into it so I can share all the books that I got into. Okay, let's start with book number one. So book number one that I read this month was Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And this is probably my least favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid that I've read of hers. And I love her books. I love the way that she writes. I love the way that she can kind of bring that like pop culture feel in her latest books, at least, like the Malibu Rising, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, all of those famous books that a lot of people have read by now. But this is one of her older ones that I wanted to pick up because I wanted to know and understand the feeling of her writing before it kind of changed over to this like pop culture feel that she has now. So what Forever Interrupted is about is basically this girl named Ellis Porter is about 20 something, and she like moves to a new area and she meets this guy unexpectedly at a pizza store and they fall in love very quickly. And it's such like a beautiful like instant love, but then I can say this because it happens in the first chapter, so it's not really a spoiler, but the guy ends up dying unexpectedly, and it goes basically between present and past of her like grieving, but then the past of her like story meeting him and their love story. So I really enjoyed like the past present, like getting to hear their love story was very cute and I loved it, but I had a really hard time like connecting with the characters, mainly because like he dies like in the first chapter. So like I don't feel in love with him yet when he dies, so it's like I'm not really connected to that like grief feeling. I feel like if that happened later in the book I would have felt like attached to him and then very sad with Ellis, you know. I would have felt that like sadness with her and I would have felt like that grief with her, which I think would have been much more powerful than him passing in the beginning before I even knew their story. I think if it was kind of like reversed, like we fell in love with him, like fell through that story with her, and then like midway through the book kind of tables turned, I think it would have been way more impactful. It's definitely really cute and it's a really easy read. I only read this in like a day, so I definitely recommend it, but it's not my top of Taylor Jenkins reads. You can find better ones. Next, I read or I listened to an audiobook, and like I was saying, this is the first time I've gotten into audiobooks. I recently discovered how to listen to audiobooks from your library for free, so it's amazing and I recommend it to anyone. And if you want some tips, comment down below. I can help you get that set up, but it's awesome. So I started listening to audiobooks, you know, while I'm cleaning, doing grocery shopping, all that jazz, and it's so fun. And I wanted to start getting into like memoirs or kind of self-helpy, but like not, because I feel like those are easier audiobooks to listen to because you don't have to focus too much. So the first audiobook I listened to was You're Not Listening and Why That Matters, something along that lines. I'll like put the photo here. And it was really interesting. She basically was talking about the best way to listen and like why it's important to listen, and she talks to like FBI detectives who it's their job to like fully listen to someone and get into their know, and then she talks to like workplaces and like how that matters. And it was really helpful to me to learn like the proper way of listening, and really it is just about like being quiet, like to really, it's really about like not overshadowing a conversation with your own life, your own problems, your own discussion, and letting someone else like fully talk to you, and you absorbing it, and you like not validating what they're feeling by saying like, I've had the same experience, but saying like, how does that make you feel, or like what did happen after that, like kind of engaging and like bringing their story out, and not like relating. Like nobody wants to hear you like relate to them, and nobody wants to kind of feel that like that their story doesn't matter because you're trying to like bring yourself into it. Ideal listening is really fully just being present in what they're saying and trying to draw more of their story out in a very like organic way, and curiosity. She talked a lot about like being curious about like what someone's saying, and just like being curious about their story, and that will be the best type of listener, is someone who's genuinely just curious. And I found this book extremely helpful in my life in ways that I didn't really like start reading it because of that, but it just ended up being that way. Like I feel like now in my job I'm a better listener, and in my friendships and relationships I'm a better listener, and it's been helpful in the way that I feel like I'm giving to my relationships in a better way than I was before. So highly recommend, if you are into audiobooks, this is a great one to kind of pop into your list to listen to. I gave that one a 4 stars. I forgot to mention that was a 4 stars for me, and then the Forever Interrupted was a 3 stars for me. Circling back to that. Next book I read was Colleen Hoover's new release, which was Reminders of Him. And you know me, I love Colleen Hoover, and this was a really interesting one from her because it is basically about a mother who moved to a new town to basically reconnect with their daughter because she was like separated from her daughter. I don't want to give it away on like why she was, or like the situation, because I feel like that really is kind of the background of the story. But it's a different kind of read from Colleen Hoover, because usually she focuses on like relationships, and yes, there is a relationship in this story, but it is also like completely about mother-daughter love, and how like trying to ignite a relationship with your daughter can be like very complicated. And it was just really beautiful. It's not my favorite of hers, like I didn't really feel that connected, and there was like some cheesiness to it that I didn't really love, so it was kind of average for me. And I think I gave it, let me just check how many stars I gave it. I gave it a 4 stars. So obviously it's a good read and I highly recommend it to anyone, but it's just not my 5-star Colleen Hoover that I'm used to. Next, I listened to another audiobook that'll pop up here, but it's Whistleblower, My Justice, or My Journey for Justice in the Silicon Valley, something like that. Again, I'll pop it up here. But it was really, really interesting. Basically, this story follows someone who worked at Uber. I'm kind of forgetting her name right now, and I feel really bad. I always do this. Why do I forget the characters' names? I always do this. But she worked for Uber, and she's talking, and she's a software engineer. And a software engineer as a female is not very common. So she's in an industry that's like dominated by males currently, and she talks about basically the workplace environment in Uber and how it was very, very toxic. And she also talks about a couple other places she worked that also didn't have like great work environments, and her just trying to like navigate talking about it or not talking about it, and trying to bring justice while she worked there and not really having success. It's super, super fascinating, and I felt like I could really relate, not in my current job, but in past jobs that I've had, in that like work environment where you aren't sure if you're the crazy one for feeling like things are not right or people aren't treating you right, or if it actually is wrong. Does that make sense? Like you start to think that it's your doing and that you are an unvaluable employee, if that makes, and that it's not like the environment that you're in that's making you feel that way. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but it was a really impactful read for me. I found it really fascinating to hear not only the life of a software engineer, because I find that industry so interesting, like being able to code and like create programs and softwares, but also just her story in general of like how she went from having no high school education, literally zero. She didn't go to high school, she was homeschooled for a while, but then her mom had to get jobs, so then her mom couldn't even homeschool her, and she taught herself the courses she needed to get into this program at university to go into philosophy, is what she started in. Philosophy and music. And she took every course that she needed and like read every book that she knew was in that course to get herself the education, and then she wrote to the university saying, I read these books specifically, I've taught myself these things specifically, here's some examples of my problems. Like, she showed them that she did the work even though she didn't have the like credits, and she got in, and then it's her story of like going through university. It's like so fascinating to see like her grind into getting into the Silicon Valley to start with, and then her experience there, and how she, like, from all of these different experiences that led up to this environment, gave her the strength to know that she should speak up. And she's had a lot of coworkers that feel the same, but like they haven't lived the same environment growing up that she has, to know that like she should speak up. And it was just so powerful. So highly recommend if you want to read like a memoir about someone's life and them like getting into a powerful work environment with nothing. It was so incredible and inspiring, and just interesting to me personally, because I'm really into like coding and that kind of life. So I found it really interesting to like understand that background. And so if you can hear the train in the background, it's a train passing. It's like a couple blocks away, but apparently it's still kind of noisy here, so don't mind that. The next book I listened to, another audiobook, because I was obsessed. I told you I was really obsessed this month. The next one I listened to was Greenlights, and I wanted to listen to this versus reading it because it's a story about Matthew McConaughey's, you know, life and just his memoir. And he's the one that like reads it in the audiobook, so it's like really fascinating. Wow, this train is like extra noisy today. Like, what's going on? Should I wait? Do you guys like this noise in the background? Because it's okay. It's almost done. Just give me a sec. Alright, here we go. With that, McConaughey's life, and so the audiobook is fun because Matthew McConaughey is the one reading it, so it's kind of like he's acting in a way, and honestly halfway through the book it got annoying. I'm not gonna lie, he started like screaming certain scenes and just being too into it that it got like annoying. I was like, can you just read it? I want to get through this. It's like okay. But I'm not loving it, and I gave it a 2 stars. I kind of absolutely hated it, but like didn't mind it. I didn't mind the concepts, and I didn't mind the feel and the way he wrote about his life. I thought that was pretty clever, and I enjoyed the meaning he brought from different stories in his life. But I kind of hated like him making something out of nothing sometimes, or he even makes something out of like, okay, this is weird, and I know it's gonna sound weird, but it happens 3 times in the book, okay, 3 times. So it's a bit weird, and I feel like I should bring it up because if you want to read this book, it'll kind of make sense if you read this book. But he has 3 wet dreams, yes, wet dreams, that he brings meaning to in his life. He's like, oh, I had a dream that I was in Africa, so I have to go to Africa. And then there's this like revolutionary thing that happens in Africa, even though it's really not that revolutionary. He could have had it in LA if he just like thought and sat in his thoughts. And no, maybe that's a bit harsh, but I gave this a 2 stars because I just couldn't relate, and it was interesting, like his stories, and some of them of the meanings were like inspiring for sure, but then other ones I was just like, all right, like lucky you, like cool. And like, please stop with the yelling in this audiobook. And so it's a 2 stars for me. All right, back to books that I actually read instead of listened to, was another Colleen Hoover, and this was November 9, and I read this while I was, sick, and it was a great quick read to read while I was sick and didn't have like the brain capacity to do much else. I honestly love this book. So basically it's about this guy named Ben, and he falls in love with, what's her name? Fallon. And they like kind of unexpectedly meet together on November 9th. I don't want to give it away, but they meet together on November 9th and then have this like whirlwind of a date on November 9th. And she, the next day, is moving. So obviously they can't like reconnect and have this like relationship or even friendship because she's gonna be like completely gone. But they decide that every year they will meet on November 9th. They won't share phone numbers, they won't share emails, they won't share socials. They even blocked each other in their socials. And they said, every November 9th, let's see each other. And it's just like this beautiful romance of like them meeting up every November 9th and just starting off where they left off, if that makes sense. And it's so cute. And the book literally only brings you on the November 9th date, which I love because I kind of hate when you're like back and forth between characters and you're like, I just want to get to the juice. But she only talks about the juice, so you only are seeing November 9th, which is great. And it's really cute. And there's lots of ups and downs because, life has lots of ups and downs, and imagine like all the things that happened in a year and just meeting up with someone and like reconnecting about everything that's happened in that year. Lots of things can change, and when you're not like staying in touch with someone with the phone or even a social, it can be pretty complicated to like keep that connection. But also, I don't know, like it's interesting to see how their love like prevails, and you fall deeply in love with the characters, and at the end you realize they only really met 4 times, which is wild, but like they feel like they have been together for 4 years. Does that make sense? It's beautiful, and I highly recommend. I think I gave this a 5 stars. If I didn't, I should, because it's great. 2 more books here that I read this month. So it was a pretty heavy book month, but honestly it was the audiobooks that really pulled it through for me. This next one is The Fields by Erin Young. This was like all over the shelves when I went to Chapters, so I was really interested. And it's a thriller mystery, basically, where a woman's body is found in a cornfield, and then a couple other women's bodies are found, and they might be connected. And this is really like detailed. All right, we like get the whole like autopsy in detail of every girl, and it's kind of like watching a Criminal Minds episode in this book. But I gotta say, I did not fall in love with this. I gave it a 2 stars, and it just didn't entice me. The ending wasn't exciting. There was nothing like gripping me the whole way. Like there was kind of this underlying story that was easy to connect, and so you kind of knew the ending from the beginning. And then also like there's no characters that I was like really hooked onto, so it was kind of like reading a cold case with no background, no like funness to it, like literally just reading like a cold case report. That's kind of what it felt like. It was interesting if you really like crime scenes and that like FBI feel. Maybe you'll love this book, but I kind of was disconnected from it and didn't really love it that much. So it's a 2 star for me, but it is really interesting. And I think it's gonna be a series. I'm not quite sure. Like the ending didn't make me feel like it was gonna be a series, but it also says somewhere here that it's like part of her first of potential series. So I don't know, maybe. I won't be reading the next one though. And my last book from March was It's After by Anna Todd. And I'll insert it here. And it was really cute. It's kind of like that grumpy sunshine trope romance. And I didn't realize till after I read it that apparently it's like a fan fiction of One Direction, which is hilarious now that I've read it. I don't know if I could have read it the same way if I had known that before, so sorry if I'm ruining it for you that I'm saying this if you go to read it. But it was really cute. It was like grumpy to sunshine classic, like they're in university and she's there to really like excel in her studies, and this like grumpy guy comes along and just like swipes her off her feet and shows her like just the ways to really enjoy your life, and it's shorter than you think and all of that kind of jazz, and it's really cute. So I would recommend, but don't think about One Direction as you're reading it, because that will probably make it a bit weird. But I think I gave that book 3 stars. Like, it was cute, it was, you know, an easy read and a bit of spice, but it was nothing like mind-blowing. It was nothing like heartstrings tied. It was more just a good, heartfelt, fun, grumpy sunshine trope read. So yeah, that is all of my books that I read in March, and I had such a fun time reading all of these books. I think there was so many good ones, and I loved that I had a good mix of like memoirs, romances, thrillers. It was really fun. I feel like I just kind of went with the flow, and after I finished one book I was like, what kind of style do I want to read next, and I just jumped into it. Really fun. If you've made it to the end of this video, comment love books, something like that, code word love books, and I'll know that you're like my true fan. But thanks for joining me in this beautiful day outside, and I will see you guys for the next video.